The truth has a way of catching up to you, no matter how fast you think you can run. The fluorescent lights of the Stade de France press room buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Marcus Thompson adjusted his microphone for the third time, his palms slick with nervous sweat. 20 years of journalism had taught him to trust his instincts, but something felt different about this assignment, something that made his old injury ache in ways it hadn't since his running days ended in disgrace. He'd come to Paris to cover what should have been a routine Olympic story, but the moment he'd stepped off the plane, fragments of suppressed memories had begun surfacing like pieces of a shattered mirror. The smell of track rubber, the sound of starting blocks clicking into place, the face of his former coach, Dr. Helena Voss, who'd vanished without explanation the day after Marcus's career-ending accident. Now, as he prepared to interview the legendary Usain Bolt about retirement and legacy, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't coincidence, that somehow this meeting had been orchestrated. But by whom? And why was his heart racing faster than it had since his final fateful race in 2004? What Marcus didn't know was that his next question would unlock a truth that had been buried for 2 decades. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus forced his breathing to steady as the press room filled with the familiar chaos of international media. Cameras clicked and whirred around him like mechanical insects, their lenses all trained on the empty podium where Bolt would soon appear. The air conditioning struggled against the August heat, creating a humid tension that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of Atlanta, 2004, the last time he'd been this close to Olympic greatness. "Thompson, you getting this?" Sarah Chen, his producer, crackled through his earpiece. Back in the cramped broadcast booth of Sports Central Network, she was probably juggling 6 different feeds while nursing her 4th espresso. "We need something viral here. Network's bleeding money, and this retirement angle is our shot." Marcus nodded, though she couldn't see him. SCN was barely hanging on, a third-tier sports network that survived on sensational takes and controversy. It wasn't where a Pulitzer-nominated investigative journalist should have ended up, but pride was a luxury he'd lost, along with his Achilles tendon and his Olympic dreams. "Just remember," Sarah continued, her voice sharp with desperation, "we need the old Marcus Thompson magic. The guy who could make readers care about high school football scandals, not the—" She trailed off, but he knew what she meant. Not the broken-down former runner who'd spent the last 5 years chasing dead-end stories about small-time corruption. The press room door opened with a hydraulic hiss, and Marcus felt the familiar electric anticipation that preceded greatness entering a room. But it wasn't Bolt yet, just another wave of reporters, their press badges swaying as they claimed the remaining seats. A Japanese journalist, a woman from the BBC whose face Marcus recognized from past Olympics, and in the back corner, a figure in a dark suit who seemed oddly out of place among the sports media. Marcus's gaze lingered on the man. Something about his stillness, the way he observed rather than participated, triggered an old reporter's instinct. But before Marcus could analyze it further, his attention was yanked back by a familiar name crackling through someone else's radio. Dr. Helena Voss, requesting press credentials for— The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His pen slipped from suddenly numb fingers, clattering to the floor. Helena Voss, his former sports medicine doctor, performance coach, and the woman who'd disappeared 24 hours after his injury ended his career. The woman who'd promised him Olympic gold and delivered only questions that still haunted his dreams. "You okay, mate?" The British journalist beside him leaned over, genuine concern in her voice. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus forced a smile that felt like broken glass. "Just pre-interview nerves." But it wasn't nerves, it was recognition. Recognition that the past he'd spent 20 years trying to outrun had somehow followed him to Paris. The same city where he'd first met Helena at a biomechanics conference in 2003, where she'd approached him with promises of revolutionary training methods and whispered theories about the corruption embedded in international athletics. The press room doors opened again, and this time the energy shifted unmistakably. Usain Bolt entered with the casual confidence of someone who'd conquered the world at 9.58 seconds and knew it. Even in retirement, he moved with that distinctive rhythm that had captivated audiences for over a decade. Marcus felt his heart rate spike, not with the familiar journalist's adrenaline, but with something deeper and more troubling. As Bolt settled behind the microphone, scanning the crowd with those sharp, intelligent eyes, Marcus was transported back to his own press conferences. The brief, shining moment when he'd been the story instead of telling it. When he'd been Flash Thompson, the fastest American in the 100 meters since Carl Lewis, destined for Olympic glory until... "Good afternoon, everyone." Bolt's voice cut through Marcus's spiral of memory. "Happy to take your questions about the state of athletics, retirement, and what comes next." Hands shot up around the room. Marcus's rose automatically, muscle memory from 2 decades of press conferences. When Bolt's gaze found his, Marcus felt an odd jolt of recognition? Impossible. They'd never met, though Marcus had covered plenty of races where Bolt had dominated. Yes, the gentleman in the blue shirt. Marcus stood, feeling the familiar rush of being on the record, of holding a microphone that could broadcast his voice to millions. This was his element now, his second career, the thing he'd built from the ashes of his first dreams. "Marcus Thompson, Sports Central Network," he began, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "Given your retirement and the current state of sprinting, there's been talk about whether we'll ever see times like yours again, whether the sport has lost some of its authenticity." The word hung in the air, loaded with implications Marcus hadn't intended. Or had he? Something about being in this room, with Helena's name echoing in his ears and old ghosts stirring, had made him reckless. Bolt's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight narrowing of the eyes that spoke of deeper understanding. "Authenticity is an interesting word, Mr. Thompson. What exactly do you mean by that?" Marcus felt the room waiting, felt the cameras rolling, felt history crystallizing around his next words. The weight of Bolt's questions settled over Marcus like a lead blanket. In the 3 seconds of silence that followed, he could hear Sarah's voice screaming through his earpiece, though whether she was urging him forward or pulling him back, he couldn't tell. The press room had gone cemetery quiet, 40 journalists holding their collective breath as they sensed blood in the water. "What I mean," Marcus heard himself saying, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who'd spent 2 decades asking hard questions, "is whether we can trust that the times we're seeing now are natural, whether the playing field is as level as fans believe." The moment the words left his mouth, Marcus knew he'd crossed a line. But which line? And why did it feel like he'd been pushed rather than jumped? Around the room, cameras swiveled toward him, sensing controversy. The BBC journalist beside him shifted uncomfortably. Even the man in the dark suit had straightened, suddenly alert. Bolt leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Thompson. Are you asking about performance enhancement? About corruption in the sport?" "I'm asking," Marcus said, feeling momentum carry him past the point of no return, "whether athletes like yourself represent authentic achievement, or whether there are forces behind the scenes that determine who gets to be legendary and who gets forgotten." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks as he realized how his words might be interpreted, how they'd be interpreted by viewers watching around the world. He'd essentially questioned the legitimacy of the greatest sprinter in history, live on camera, with no evidence beyond his own paranoia and 20-year-old suspicions. But something strange happened in that silence. Bolt's expression didn't shift to anger or indignation. Instead, there was something almost like recognition, as if Marcus had asked exactly the question Bolt had been waiting to hear. "You know what's interesting about authenticity, Mr. Thompson?" Bolt's voice was measured, careful. "Sometimes the most important races aren't the ones you see on television. Sometimes athletes disappear from the public eye not because they lack talent, but because they've seen things that make certain people uncomfortable." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Was Bolt talking about him? About his own mysterious injury and rapid fall from grace? Or was this about something larger, something that connected to Helena's disappearance and the questions that had haunted him for 20 years. Some runners, Bolt continued, his gaze locked on Marcus, get silenced before they can reach their full potential. And sometimes those same runners end up in other careers, still searching for answers to questions they've never been allowed to ask. The press room erupted. Journalists shouted follow-up questions, cameras flashed, and Marcus felt the familiar chaos of a story breaking around him. But this time, he wasn't controlling the narrative, he was trapped inside it. "That's all the time we have," Bolt's media handler announced. But Bolt himself remained seated, his eyes still on Marcus. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus found himself frozen in place. His phone was buzzing incessantly. Texts, calls, social media notifications. Sarah's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Jesus Christ, Marcus, what the hell was that?" "The video's already getting shared. Network brass is calling. This is either the best thing you've ever done or—" Marcus pulled out his earpiece. Around him, the press room emptied, but he couldn't seem to move. What had just happened? Had he stumbled into something real, or had he just destroyed his career with a reckless question born from his own unresolved trauma? "Mr. Thompson." Marcus looked up to find the man in the dark suit standing beside his chair. Up close, he was older than Marcus had initially thought, with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of expensive watch that suggested serious money. "I think we should talk," the man said quietly. "About authenticity, about athletes who disappear, about Dr. Helena Voss." Marcus's world tilted. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been watching your career for a long time. Both careers." The man placed a business card on Marcus's chair. It was heavy stock, expensive, with only a phone number printed in simple black type. "When you're ready to learn what really happened in 2004, call that number." The man walked away before Marcus could respond, leaving him alone in the nearly empty press room, with a business card that felt like it might explode in his hands. Outside, rain had begun to fall against the windows, and Marcus could see his reflection ghosted in the glass. A 34-year-old man who looked every day of his age, haunted by questions he'd never learned to stop asking. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. "The video's gone viral. 2.3 million views in 20 minutes. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed. UB." Marcus stared at the message until his vision blurred, wondering if his ordinary world had just ended or if it had been an illusion all along. Marcus's hands trembled as he stared at the text message. UB, Usain Bolt. The man had his personal number, which meant this wasn't random, which meant the press conference hadn't been a coincidence at all. The business card felt heavier in his other hand, its simple elegance somehow more ominous than if it had been covered in skulls and crossbones. One phone number, 20 years of questions, and the name that had haunted his dreams since 2004, Dr. Helena Voss. The press room had emptied completely now, leaving Marcus alone with the ghosts of his past and the wreckage of his present. Through the tall windows, Paris stretched beneath the gathering storm, its lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening darkness. He'd come here to cover a story. Instead, he'd become one. His phone rang, jerking him back to reality. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, and Marcus knew he couldn't avoid her forever. He answered on the fourth ring. "Marcus, thank God. Are you insane?" Sarah's voice was pitched somewhere between panic and excitement. "The network executives have been calling non-stop. That video, it's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, CNN just picked it up. You basically accused Usain Bolt of—" "I didn't accuse him of anything," Marcus said, though even as he spoke he wasn't sure that was true. "I asked about authenticity in the sport. You questioned the legitimacy of the greatest sprinter in history, on live television." Sarah paused, and Marcus could hear her typing frantically in the background. But here's the thing, his response is what's got everyone talking. Athletes who disappear, runners who get silenced. "Marcus, what the hell did you stumble into?" Marcus looked down at the business card again. The paper was expensive, cream-colored, with a subtle watermark he could only see when he held it to the light. No name, no company, just a phone number that somehow felt like a loaded gun. "Sarah, I need to ask you something," Marcus said slowly. "When you were setting up this assignment, Did anyone specifically request that I be the one to cover Bolt's appearance? Silence on the other end. Then, actually, yeah. That's weird that you ask. The Olympics Committee specifically requested you for the press conference. Said they had a slot reserved for SCN, but only if Marcus Thompson was the reporter assigned. Marcus's blood turned cold. Who made that request? I don't know. It came through official channels, but now that you mention it, Sarah's voice trailed off. Marcus, you're scaring me. What's going on? Before Marcus could answer, his phone chimed with another text. Same unknown number, room 847, Hotel Meurice, 1 hour, come alone. We have much to discuss about your Achilles tendon, UB. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His Achilles tendon, the injury that had ended his career, that had been diagnosed as a complete rupture during training just 6 weeks before the 2004 Olympics. The injury that Helena Voss had been treating, that she'd insisted was healing faster than medically possible, until suddenly it wasn't healing at all. Marcus, are you there? I have to go, Marcus said, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. Wait, don't. The network wants you to do follow-up interviews. This story is huge, and you're at the center of it. Whatever you stumbled onto, we need to... Marcus hung up. He stared at the business card, then at the text message, feeling like a man standing at the edge of a cliff with two very different ways to fall. He could call the number on the card and learn about Helena Voss and whatever conspiracy the mysterious man believed had destroyed his career. Or he could meet with Bolt and discover why the fastest man in history knew intimate details about an injury from 20 years ago. Both choices felt like doors he couldn't walk back through once opened. Both promised answers to questions he'd been afraid to ask for 2 decades. And both suggested that his life, from his Olympic dreams to his career-ending injury to his presence in this press room today, had been orchestrated by forces he couldn't see. The rain was falling harder now, drumming against the windows with increasing intensity. Marcus thought about the scared kid he'd been in 2004, lying on a medical table while Helena whispered promises about revolutionary treatments and warned him about people who wanted to see him fail. He thought about the broken man he'd become, chasing small stories for a failing network, always running from the one story that might actually matter. The choice stretched before him like a finish line he'd been approaching his entire adult life. Behind door number 1, the mysterious man with expensive taste and dangerous knowledge. Behind door number 2, Usain Bolt, who somehow knew secrets about Marcus's past that even Marcus didn't understand. Marcus stood up, pocketed both the business card and his phone, and walked toward the exit. The ordinary world he'd built from the ashes of his dreams was crumbling around him, and for the first time in 20 years, he felt ready to let it fall. He had a choice to make, and 60 minutes to make it. Marcus stepped into the rain-soaked streets of Paris, but his feet wouldn't carry him toward either destination. Instead, he found himself walking aimlessly through the Trocadero Gardens, the Eiffel Tower looming above him like a monument to dreams that actually came true. His phone buzzed incessantly, Sarah calling back, notifications from social media, news alerts about his own viral moment, but he couldn't bring himself to look at any of it. 53 minutes. That's how long he had before the meeting with Bolt, assuming he chose that path. The business card felt like it was burning a hole in his jacket pocket, an alternative that promised answers but reeked of danger. What if he chose neither? The thought stopped him cold on the gravel path. For 20 years, he'd been running from the truth about his injury, about Helena's disappearance, about the nagging suspicion that his career hadn't ended by accident. He could keep running. Take the next flight back to New York, tell Sarah he'd had a breakdown, maybe even check himself into some facility for a few weeks until the viral video faded from public memory. People forgot things quickly these days. But even as he considered it, Marcus knew it was impossible. The text message about his Achilles tendon proved that his past had already caught up with him. Someone, multiple someones, had been orchestrating this moment for years, possibly decades. Running away now wouldn't change that. A jogger passed him on the path, and Marcus watched enviously as the woman disappeared into the misty evening. When was the last time he'd run? Really run, not just the obligatory treadmill sessions to keep his middle-aged body from falling apart completely, but actually run? He couldn't remember. After the injury, running had become a reminder of everything he'd lost, rather than everything he'd once been capable of. Some runners get silenced before they can reach their full potential. Bolt's words echoed in his mind, and Marcus realized they contained an assumption that terrified him, that he'd actually had potential to reach. What if that was wrong? What if his injury had been a convenient excuse for a career that was destined to flame out anyway? What if he'd never been as fast as he'd believed, never been Olympic material, and the conspiracy he'd imagined was just his ego's way of protecting him from the truth of his own mediocrity? 47 minutes. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through the news coverage of his press conference. The headlines were brutal. Reporter accuses Usain Bolt of fraud. Olympic conspiracy theorist melts down live. Has been sprinter turned journalist goes rogue. But buried in the comment threads, he found something else. People who remembered him. Track and field fans who posted grainy photos of his college races, statistics from his brief professional career, speculation about what might have been if he hadn't gotten injured. Flash Thompson was legitimately fast, someone had written. Sub 10 times in practice. He was going to be a threat at Athens if he'd stayed healthy. Another comment, I was at the trials in 2004. Thompson looked untouchable in warm-ups, then just disappeared. Always wondered what happened. Validation should have felt good, but instead it made everything worse. If he really had been Olympic material, then his injury truly was suspicious. And if it was suspicious, then Helena's disappearance, the mysterious man with expensive taste, and Bolt's cryptic knowledge all pointed to something much larger and more dangerous than Marcus was prepared to handle. 39 minutes. His phone rang again, but this time it wasn't Sarah. The caller ID showed a number with a Paris area code, the Hotel Meurice. Mr. Thompson? This is the concierge at Hotel Meurice. I have a message for you from our guest in room 847. He wants you to know that if you decide not to come, he understands, but the offer expires tonight. He also asked me to tell you that Dr. Voss sends her regards. The line went dead before Marcus could respond. Helena was alive. Not only alive, but somehow connected to all of this. The woman who'd promised to revolutionize his training, who'd whispered theories about corrupt officials and fixed races, who'd vanished the day after his career ended, she was still out there, still pulling strings. Marcus sank onto a wet bench, rain soaking through his jacket. Every instinct he'd developed as an investigative journalist screamed that this was a trap. The convenient press conference, the viral video, the mysterious offers from shadowy figures. It was all too orchestrated, too perfect. He was being manipulated, guided towards some predetermined endpoint by people who understood his psychology better than he did. But his reporter's instincts also recognized the biggest story of his career sitting right in front of him. Olympic corruption, silenced athletes, mysterious doctors. If even half of what was being implied was true, it would be the kind of investigation that won Pulitzers and destroyed governments. 2008 minutes. Time to choose between the story that might save his career and the safety of continued ignorance. Marcus stood up, rain streaming down his face, and finally admitted what he'd known since the moment Bolt had looked into his eyes. He was going to see this through, no matter how badly it ended. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed the number from the business card. His fingers moved before his rational mind could stop them, muscle memory overriding 20 years of carefully constructed caution. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered, cultured, precise, with just a hint of an accent he couldn't place. I was beginning to think you'd chosen the hotel. Who are you? Marcus asked, stepping deeper into the shadows between two lampposts. The Eiffel Tower's lights had just come on, casting everything in harsh relief. Someone who knew you before you became Marcus Thompson, investigative journalist, back when you were just Flash. The kid from Detroit who could run faster than physics suggested was possible. The man paused. Dr. Voss spoke about you often, even after you disappeared from the circuit. Helena's name hit him like a physical blow. Where is she? Closer than you think. Farther than you'd hope. Another pause. The hotel meeting is a trap, Mr. Thompson. a very elegant one, designed by people who've been planning this moment since 2004. If you go there, you'll get answers, but not the ones you need, and you'll become part of their game permanently. Marcus looked at his phone's clock. 23 minutes. And if I meet with you instead? Then you learn why your Achilles tendon didn't tear accidentally, why Helena disappeared, and why Usain Bolt just put himself at considerable risk to warn you publicly that something is coming. The voice grew softer, more urgent. But you have to choose now, Marcus. This intersection, this moment where your past and present collide, it only exists for the next few minutes. After that, other people start making choices for you. The rain was soaking through Marcus's jacket now, but he barely noticed. Every instinct screamed that this was exactly what the voice claimed, a moment of no return, balanced on a knife's edge. Behind him lay 20 years of running from the truth. Ahead lay, what? Justice? Revenge? Death? Where? Marcus heard himself ask. Metro Bir Hakim. Platform level, eastbound side. Look for the maintenance door marked Defense d'Entrée. It will be unlocked. The voice hesitated. And Marcus? Bring your press credentials. Where we're going, you're going to need proof that you're a journalist. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment, watching raindrops streak across the screen. In the distance he could hear sirens, police or ambulance, he couldn't tell. Paris continued its evening rhythm around him, oblivious to the fact that his entire world was reshaping itself with each passing second. He thought about calling Sarah back, about leaving some record of where he was going in case things went badly. But what would he say? That he was following a mysterious voice into the Paris underground to investigate a 20-year-old conspiracy involving his own past? It sounded insane even to him. 18 minutes. Marcus started walking toward the nearest metro station, his pace increasing with each step. As he moved, something loosened in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for so long he'd forgotten it was there. For 2 decades he'd been a passenger in his own life, letting other people's choices and circumstances carry him forward. Even his journalism had been reactive, responding to stories rather than creating them. But this, whatever this was, belonged to him. It was his mystery, his past, his choice to make. The scared kid who'd lain on Helena's treatment table, confused and broken, was finally ready to demand answers. The metro platform was nearly empty when he arrived. A few late commuters hurried past him toward the stairs, eager to escape the underground dampness. Marcus found the maintenance door exactly where the voice had promised, tucked between 2 advertising posters in a section of platform that seemed designed to discourage lingering. 12 minutes until the hotel meeting he wouldn't attend. Marcus tested the handle. Unlocked, as promised. Beyond the door, he could hear the distant hum of machinery and see a narrow corridor stretching into shadows. Warning signs in French covered the door, but he was past the point of heeding warnings. He thought about Bolt's words again. Some runners get silenced before they can reach their full potential. Maybe this was his chance to find out what his full potential had really been. Maybe it was his chance to finally stop running from his own life. Marcus pulled out his press credentials, checked that his phone's recording function was working, and stepped through the maintenance door into the unknown. Behind him, the ordinary world continued its predictable routines. Ahead lay answers that had been waiting 20 years for him to be brave enough to seek them. The door clicked shut behind him with a sound like finality, and Marcus Thompson, former Olympic hopeful, failed athlete, mediocre journalist, finally stopped running away. The corridor stretched ahead like a throat waiting to swallow him. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow, and the air carried the metallic taste of old electricity and forgotten spaces. Marcus's footsteps echoed off concrete walls as he followed the narrow passage deeper into the bowels of Paris. "Keep walking straight," a voice called from somewhere ahead. The same cultured tone from the phone, but distorted now by the tunnel's acoustics. "There's a service elevator at the end. Take it down 2 levels. Marcus's journalist instincts kicked in automatically. He noted the industrial pipes running along the ceiling, the numbered access panels, the pristine cleanliness despite the location's apparent abandonment. This wasn't just a maintenance tunnel. It was actively maintained, recently used. Someone had invested serious money in keeping this route functional. The elevator was exactly where promised, hidden behind a door marked with electrical warnings. As it descended with mechanical precision, Marcus realized he was crossing into territory governed by rules he didn't understand yet. The ordinary world above, with its press conferences and viral videos and hotel meetings, suddenly felt like a stage set, artificial and temporary. The doors opened onto something that shouldn't have existed. "Welcome to the real Olympics," said the man from the phone. Marcus stepped into a vast underground facility that stretched beyond his sightlines. Banks of monitors covered every wall, displaying what looked like biometric data, training schedules, and real-time feeds from locations around the globe. The technology was decades ahead of anything Marcus had seen, sleek and seamlessly integrated. But what stopped him cold were the photographs. Hundreds of them, covering an entire wall like a memorial. Athletes from every era, every sport, every nation. Some faces he recognized, champions who died young, promising careers cut short by mysterious injuries or sudden retirements. Others were strangers, but their eyes held the same haunted quality Marcus recognized from his own mirror. "Dr. Helena Voss," the man said, extending his hand. "We've been waiting for you to find us." Marcus spun around. The woman approaching him was older than he remembered, silver threading through her dark hair, but her eyes were exactly as they'd been 20 years ago, brilliant, intense, and slightly dangerous. The white lab coat was gone, replaced by expensive civilian clothes, but she moved with the same clinical precision that had both comforted and unnerved him as a young athlete. "Helena." The name came out strangled. "You disappeared. After my injury, I looked for you everywhere." "I didn't disappear, Marcus. I was extracted." She gestured toward the wall of monitors. "When certain people realized what I was discovering about performance enhancement protocols, about the systematic elimination of athletes who couldn't be controlled, they gave me a choice. Join them or join the memorial wall." The man who'd called him extended his hand. "Dr. James Kepler. I run this facility." He was younger than his voice had suggested, maybe 40, with the kind of lean build that suggested serious athletic training. "We're what's left of the International Clean Athletics Coalition, an organization that officially doesn't exist." Marcus looked between them, his mind racing. The ICC was disbanded in 2003, funding cuts. "Public funding cuts," Helena corrected. "We went underground, literally, as you can see." She moved to one of the monitors and pulled up what looked like a complex organizational chart. "Do you want to know what really happened to your Achilles tendon?" Before Marcus could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and every monitor simultaneously switched to the same image, the exterior of the Hotel Meurice, where armed figures in tactical gear were surrounding the building. "They're early," Kepler muttered, his fingers flying over a keyboard. "The hotel meeting was supposed to buy us more time." "What hotel meeting?" Helena demanded, but her eyes were already on Marcus. "Please tell me you didn't contact them." "I didn't," Marcus said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "I chose to come here instead, but they called me. From the hotel. They knew I wasn't coming." The monitors showed tactical teams entering the hotel lobby. Kepler's expression darkened. "They've been tracking your phone, which means they now know approximately where you are." He moved to another console and began typing rapidly. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they triangulate this location." Helena grabbed Marcus's arm. 20 years ago, your injury wasn't an accident. You were being prepared for something called the Prometheus Protocol, a performance enhancement program that would have made you faster than any human had ever been. But it required complete psychological control of the subjects. You were too independent, too questioning, so they destroyed my career instead. They tried to recruit you. The injury was meant to make you desperate enough to accept experimental treatments. When you refused the follow-up procedures I recommended, when you chose conventional rehabilitation instead, she gestured toward the memorial wall, you were supposed to have an accident, a fatal one. The alarms grew louder. On the monitors, Marcus could see thermal imaging sweeps of the underground tunnels, getting closer. "Why now?" Marcus asked. "Why bring me here after 20 years?" Kepler answered, without looking up from his console. Because the Prometheus protocol is about to go live, on a scale we never imagined. And you, Mr. Thompson, are the only person who can stop it. The facility shuddered as something heavy impacted the levels above them. Whatever sanctuary Marcus had found was about to become a battleground. The facility's lights flickered as another impact shook the underground complex. Marcus felt the floor vibrate beneath his feet, a deep rhythmic pounding that suggested industrial cutting equipment working through reinforced concrete. "How am I supposed to stop anything?" Marcus demanded, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "I'm a washed-up journalist who can barely run a mile without wheezing." Helena was already moving toward a bank of servers, her fingers dancing over multiple keyboards simultaneously. "Because you're the only Prometheus candidate who escaped the program intact. Your psychological profile, your resistance to manipulation, they spent 2 years studying you, Marcus. They know exactly how your mind works, which makes you either our greatest asset," Kepler added grimly, "or their most dangerous weapon, depending on what you choose to do in the next few minutes." The monitors showed tactical teams rappelling into the upper tunnel systems, professional, coordinated, silent. These weren't police or even military. Their equipment was too advanced, their movements too precise. Private security, Marcus realized, corporate soldiers. "The Prometheus protocol," Helena continued, her voice urgent as she transferred data to portable drives, "was never about creating a few superhuman athletes. It was about perfecting the psychological control mechanisms, learning how to break someone completely and rebuild them as a controllable asset." Marcus moved closer to the memorial wall, studying the faces of dead athletes. Some he recognized now, runners who dominated the circuit briefly before mysterious injuries ended their careers. Others who died in car accidents, training mishaps, sudden medical episodes. How many? 47 confirmed kills over the past 20 years, Kepler said without looking up from his tactical display. But those are just the ones who refused recruitment or asked too many questions, the ones who accepted the program. He gestured toward another monitor showing live feeds from training facilities around the world. They're still competing. The cutting sounds were getting louder, closer. Whatever barriers protected this facility, they were being systematically dismantled. "The 2024 Olympics aren't just a sporting event," Helena explained, ejecting drives and shoving them into a equipment bag. "They're the public debut of Prometheus-enhanced athletes, superhuman performances that will redefine what people believe is possible. And once the world accepts that, the same enhancement protocols get deployed in military applications, corporate security, law enforcement." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. A world where enhanced humans are the new normal. A world where enhanced humans are controllable, Kepler corrected. The psychological conditioning doesn't just make them faster or stronger, it makes them completely obedient. Perfect soldiers, perfect employees, perfect citizens. The facility shuddered again, and this time Marcus heard the distinct sound of metal tearing. They were running out of time. "Why didn't Bolt just tell me this directly?" Marcus asked, grabbing Helena's arm as she rushed past him. "Why the cryptic warnings?" Helena's eyes met his, and he saw something there he hadn't noticed 20 years ago. Fear. "Because Usain Bolt is a Prometheus subject, Marcus. He's been enhanced since 2008. His world records, his dominance, none of it was natural. But something went wrong with his conditioning. He's been fighting their control for years, trying to find a way to expose them without triggering the fail-safes they implanted in his mind." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. The greatest sprinter in history was a manufactured product, a prototype for what was coming. "The fail-safes?" "Neurological kill switches," Kepler said flatly. "If a Prometheus subject tries to expose the program directly, their brain essentially shuts down. Massive stroke. Looks completely natural. Bolt has been working around the edges for years, trying to find someone with the knowledge and access to bring the whole thing down. Someone like you," Helena added. "Someone they tried to recruit but failed to control." The lights went out completely, replaced by emergency backup systems that cast everything in hellish red. On the monitors, Marcus could see armed figures moving through the corridors above them, methodically clearing each level. "There's an evacuation tunnel," Kepler announced, shouldering a pack full of equipment. "It comes out near Père Lachaise Cemetery. But once we leave here, we're completely exposed. No safe houses, no backup, no support systems." Helena grabbed Marcus's shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. "They're not just coming to capture us, Marcus. They're coming to bring you home. 20 years of freedom ends tonight, one way or another. Either you help us expose Prometheus, or you become their newest asset." Marcus looked around the facility one last time, at the memorial wall, at the evidence of decades of systematic murder, at the technology that could reshape human evolution. His entire adult life had been built on running away from the truth of what had happened to him. Now that truth was demanding he finally stand and fight. "If we do this," he said quietly, "if we try to expose them, they'll kill us all." Kepler smiled grimly. "Marcus, they're going to kill us anyway. The only question is whether we take their whole operation down with us." The facility shuddered one final time, and somewhere above them, Marcus heard the sound of boots on concrete, moving fast and getting closer. The sound of boots grew closer, and with it came something Marcus hadn't expected, voices he recognized. "Thompson's down there somewhere," came a familiar drawl through the facility's ventilation system. 20 years of cat and mouse ends tonight." Marcus froze. That voice belonged to Coach Reynolds, the man who'd guided his early career, who'd been there the day his Achilles snapped. The man who'd disappeared from his life immediately after the injury, claiming a family emergency that had never quite made sense. "Move," Helena hissed, but Marcus couldn't. The betrayal was too complete, too devastating. Every mentor figure from his athletic career, how many had been working for Prometheus? The evacuation tunnel stretched ahead like a mouth waiting to devour them. But as they reached its entrance, emergency blast doors began descending with mechanical inevitability. Someone upstairs had found the facility's control systems. "Secondary route," Kepler barked, reversing direction. Through the medical wing. They ran through corridors lined with equipment Marcus recognized from his nightmares. The same experimental rehabilitation machines that had worked on his destroyed tendon, the same neural monitoring devices that had tracked his recovery. This wasn't just a surveillance facility, it was where they'd tried to break him 20 years ago. "The treatment room," Helena said, breathing hard as they reached a familiar door. "There's a service shaft that connects to the old pneumatic mail system. It's narrow, but it leads to the surface." Marcus stared at the door. Behind it lay the table where he'd spent months learning to walk again, where well-meaning doctors had suggested experimental treatments that might restore his speed, where he'd said no to procedures he hadn't understood, trusting only his instinct that something felt wrong. "I can't." The words came out strangled. This room contained every broken dream, every moment of helpless rage, every night he'd lain awake wondering what his life might have been. The facility's lights strobed as their pursuers breached the main laboratory. Through the security monitors, Marcus could see tactical teams spreading through the complex with professional efficiency. But worse, he could see the faces of people he'd trusted, coaches, doctors, officials from his competitive days. An entire support network revealed as handlers, manipulators, predators. "They've been watching me my whole life," Marcus whispered, the full scope of the deception finally hitting him. "Every choice I made, every job I took, none of it was real." "Your choices were real," Helena said fiercely, checking the medical room's lock. "Your refusal to accept their treatments was real. Your decision to become a journalist, to ask difficult questions, that was you fighting back, even when you didn't know what you were fighting." Explosions echoed through the facility as shaped charges took out the blast doors. They had minutes, maybe less. Kepler emerged from the service shaft, his face grim. "It connects to the surface, but they've got teams positioned at every exit point. Thermal imaging, motion sensors, probably snipers. We're not getting out conventionally." Marcus moved to the monitors showing the tactical team's positions. Years of investigative work had trained him to spot patterns, to see the spaces between official stories. "They're surrounding us, but they're not storming this room." "Why?" Helena's face went pale, because they don't want to damage their most valuable research subject. The Prometheus conditioning, Marcus realized with growing horror. It's still in me. The neural pathways they were building, they never went away, did they? Dormant, Helena confirmed, waiting for the right trigger sequence to activate. That's why they've been so patient, why they let you have a career, a life. They knew eventually they could flip a switch and you'd become everything they'd designed you to be. The treatment room's door began to buckle under cutting tools. Soon the people who'd shaped his entire existence would walk through that door, and Marcus would finally understand what it meant to be truly powerless. But as he stared at the machines that had once tortured him back to mobility, a different understanding emerged. He'd survived their first attempt to break him through physical therapy from hell. He'd resisted their psychological manipulation for 2 decades. And now, when they expected him to collapse under the weight of revealed betrayal, he felt something unexpected rising in his chest. Anger. Pure, focused rage at having his entire life treated as an experiment. The activation sequence, Marcus said quietly, moving toward the neural monitoring equipment. If they built pathways in my brain, if they've been waiting 20 years to use them, there has to be a way to overload the system. Helena grabbed his arm. Marcus, you could give yourself a massive stroke. The human brain isn't designed to handle that kind of neural cascade. But if it works, if I can burn out their conditioning before they activate it, I'll be truly free for the first time in my life. The door exploded inward, and through the smoke stepped Coach Reynolds, older but unmistakable, flanked by tactical operatives. Hello, Marcus. Time to come home. Marcus's hand moved toward the neural interface, 20 years of stolen choices balanced against one final moment of self-determination. Marcus's fingers were inches from the neural interface when the world exploded into chaos. Coach Reynolds moved faster than any 60-year-old should be able to, crossing the room in a blur that spoke of his own enhancements. His hand clamped around Marcus's wrist with crushing force, yanking him away from the equipment with casual brutality. 20 years of freedom was generous, don't you think? Reynolds's voice carried the same encouraging tone Marcus remembered from training sessions, now twisted into something obscene. We could have activated you at any time. But the long-term psychological data was so valuable. Marcus struggled against the grip, but enhanced strength was no match for desperate fury. Around him, tactical operatives zip-tied Helena and Kepler with efficient professionalism. The sanctuary that had promised answers was becoming his prison. The neural pathways are still perfect, Reynolds continued, examining Marcus like a prize specimen. 2 decades of natural development, authentic life experiences, genuine emotional responses, all building toward this moment. You're going to be our masterpiece. Helena fought against her restraints. Marcus, don't let them. The operative beside her produced a small device that he pressed against her neck. Her words dissolved into convulsions as electrical current coursed through her body. Then she went limp. Dr. Chen always was too attached to her subjects, Reynolds observed, a flaw we corrected in later iterations. Marcus's world tilted. Helena, Dr. Chen, had been part of the program from the beginning. Even her rescue attempt, her revelations about Prometheus, her apparent defection, all of it orchestrated. The last person he'd trusted, the final thread connecting him to his authentic past, revealed as another manipulation. You see, Marcus? Every choice you made led you here, every source who fed you information, every lead you followed, every moment you thought you were investigating us, we were investigating you. Measuring your responses, fine-tuning our approach. Kepler raised his head weakly. The Prometheus protocol isn't about enhancement, it's about total psychological control, breaking someone so completely they can't tell the difference between their thoughts and their programming. Reynolds nodded approvingly. Dr. Kepler understands the science, even if his allegiances were misguided. The physical modifications are trivial compared to the mental conditioning. Speed, strength, endurance, those are just byproducts. The real achievement is creating a human being who believes they're making independent choices while following their programming perfectly. Marcus's mind reeled through 20 years of decisions. His career in journalism, had that been his choice or theirs? His investigation into Olympic corruption, his pursuit of this story, how much had been authentic curiosity and how much had been subtle manipulation guiding him toward this moment? The viral video, Marcus whispered. My racist comment about Bolt. Scripted, of course. We needed you motivated, desperate, willing to pursue dangerous leads. Usain served his purpose perfectly, even if he thought he was helping you. Reynolds smiled. Enhanced subjects are so much more convincing when they believe in their mission. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Bolt hadn't been fighting his conditioning. He'd been following it. The cryptic warnings, the coded messages, the careful guidance toward Helena and Kepler, all of it designed to bring Marcus to this room, to this moment of complete psychological destruction. We learned from our early failures, Reynolds continued, connecting Marcus to the neural interface with practiced efficiency. Breaking someone quickly leaves psychological scars, resistance patterns, but allowing them 20 years of believing they escaped? That creates the perfect foundation for reconstruction. Marcus felt the interface connect to his skull, metal probes finding pathways that had been waiting decades for activation. But instead of the searing pain he expected, there was only a gentle warmth, almost comforting. The conditioning isn't painful, Marcus. It feels like coming home. Images began flooding Marcus's mind, not his memories but corrected versions. His Olympic dreams hadn't been destroyed by injury, they'd been transcended through enhancement. His career hadn't been manipulation, it had been careful preparation for greater service. His investigation hadn't been betrayed, it had been guided toward its proper conclusion. The lies felt more real than his actual memories. Helena, Dr. Chen, stirred in her restraints, meeting his eyes one final time. I'm sorry, she whispered, for all of it. But Marcus could no longer tell if her regret was genuine or another layer of programming designed to complete his psychological destruction. The neural interface hummed with increasing intensity, 20 years of dormant pathways awakening like flowers blooming in fast forward. Welcome home, Marcus, Reynolds said softly. Let's discuss your new assignment. As Marcus felt his sense of self dissolving into carefully crafted neural patterns, his last independent thought was simple and devastating. He would never know which of his choices had truly been his own. The interface completed its work with a gentle chime, and Marcus Thompson, investigative journalist, former Olympic hopeful free human being, ceased to exist. In his place sat Asset 7, awaiting orders.